Hi there, Andre here from Peak Motorcycles. I'm back in the garage and I am here today to show you how to fit a rear shock to a Honda CRF300 Rally. Now this is exactly the same fitting process for a CRF300 Rally as it would be for a CRF300L. The difference will be around the bodywork removal. Now as you can see, I've already taken the bodywork off my bike. I have a separate video for that. If you have a look in my CRF300 Rally playlist, you will see it there. So it's the same for every suspension unit. If you've got a separate control for the preload, then you might have some extra steps, but fundamentally for removing the stock shock and putting a new one in, this is all going to be kind of the same. So there's a few things you are definitely going to need. So one is a way to support the bike that's safe, where you can actually work on the bike, where it's not going to fall off on top of you while you're doing it. The other thing is you might need a second pair of hands. I'm going to see how I go with this. I know that fitting one of the nuts, having someone on the other side who can see where it's going is going to be useful, but I don't have that. I will get Mrs. Peak Motorcycles if I really need to, but I don't want to distract her unnecessarily. That's kind of it really. I'm going to try and show you as many steps as I can. A few things that I won't mention as I'm going through, but just so you know, everything on the right hand side of the bike, which is the bolt head side, I think is a 14mm either socket or spanner, and everything on the left side of the bike is a 17mm socket or spanner. Hopefully that's enough information to get going. I'll give you a quick look at the shock and then I'll crack on with the fitting. I don't really do unboxing videos, but I guess this is me opening a box. Some people are really into this for some reason. So yeah, I'm only opening it in the box because it says Nitron on it and it says world-class suspension, which is clearly what I need on my budget CRF300 Rally, but here goes. Oh, there's a receipt, which I guess you don't need, but if you're wondering, this Nitron shock together with my Andriani fork was just over £1,000 in the UK, and then there's fitting for the fork kit on top of that, so it's the best part of £1,200, and that is a price as of May 2021, as this video might be up for a while. So user manual and some stickers, and then in here we actually have the shock. Now this did originally come in this packaging, but I took it out just to have a look at it in the shop. So yeah, hopefully you can see that clearly enough. I mean, it certainly seems like a fairly sturdy thing. Nitron offered two choices of colour for the spring. You can get a sort of turquoisey blue colour, or what they call black. Believe it or not, this is the black. Personally, I think it looks like a medium metallic grey, but hey, it's the only two choices they have. So if you think you're going to get a black one and this turns up, this is exactly what they call black. As you can see here, I've got a preload, just much like the stock one, except instead of having two lock rings, it's just one big one that has some holes into which you can put a rod to try and turn it. Whether that is accessible or not, I shall see once it's on the bike. The other thing I have is the damping adjustment, which is this, another rotary controller at the bottom. Again, I will see what that's like once it's on the bike, how accessible it is, and whether I can do that. For now, I'm just going to fit it exactly as it is. I gave them what my weight was and what I was looking to do with the bike in terms of carrying extra luggage. So it should be set up for me exactly as it should be. One thing I did notice is that there is this screw on the top, so I think that is where a remote adjuster would go if a remote adjuster becomes available. So Nitron, I know that you've got somebody else's Rally at the moment that you're fitting a shock to, but if you decide to do a remote for them, I will certainly be one of your customers. Okay, that's everything I'm going to show you about the shock. I'm now just going to go back to the bike and I will remove the stock shock. So the very first thing before you start is that you're going to need to have a way to lift the bike off the ground, take the weight off the swing arm, but not actually use the swing arm to do that. So I don't know if you can see this on here, but this is the strap that I normally use on this ABBA stand when I'm working on the bike. And this is just a very simple strap, fixes to the stand. I put it around the end of the swing arm and it stops the bike from rocking forwards when I lift it off the ground. Now the problem I'm going to have right now is that when I actually remove the shock is actually holding the swing arm up and I don't want the whole bike to swing away from that. So I've got a different strap. I've actually put that around the same bracket at the bottom, but at the top I've put it around I've put the bolt back in that would normally hold the rack, because that's a fairly sturdy point and it goes into the frame of the bike. So I put it around that and I'm going to use that strap to actually hold the bike, so that now when I unbolt the rear shock, the swing arm can actually drop away slightly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the bike down so the rear wheel is only just in contact with the ground, and then I can always lift it up a little bit if I need to. I hope all that makes sense. Essentially what you don't want to do is unbolt the shock, have the whole thing fall away. You don't want to have the weight on the back wheel so that when you unbolt the shock, the bike falls on top of you or falls away from you. It's very much just to be able to do it in a controlled manner. It doesn't matter if the swing arm drops a little bit because it's not holding anything and the bike will be safe. If you don't have one of these stands, you could do it with a motocross stand in the middle as well. You just need to be careful about exactly how it's suspended, and when you're undoing these bolts, some of which are done up quite tight, that you don't put yourself in any danger. So at this point, it's when it gets a little bit difficult from a filming perspective. So hopefully you can see in here that I have the rear shock. Now there is a screw at the top, just there. In fact, that's the nylock nut that goes on the back. The bolt is on the other side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my 14mm ratchet on the far side. I've got a 17mm socket to go on this side. And then I'm actually, in order to get that in, I'm just going to remove the negative terminal on the battery. What that will do, it will just free this up so I can get the socket in a little bit more. What I don't want to do is to pull off the negative wire off the battery while I'm doing the suspension. So for those of you that have ever done any bike electrics, you'll know that quite often batteries don't have a captive nut, and this one is no different. So when you do take the bolt out, just be careful that the little nut on the back doesn't fall on the ground and you lose it. I'm just going to pop the screw back in there. I'm just holding it in with my finger, hopefully you can see that. So that will just stop that nut on the back from dropping out. But it will give me some extra access around the bike for doing the suspension. There we go, hopefully that's easy to see. I don't know if you can see that here. I have my two 17mm and my 14mm sockets. So the 14mm, I'm going to pop in from this side. That will just rest there. The 17mm, I'm going to put in that hole that I've just made and hold that on there. There we go. So I'm hoping I can do this just as me. I'm not going to take the bolt out all the way. All I'm going to do is take the nut off the end because the bike is still up in the air and I'm really just doing this just for the video. So as you can tell, these are done up pretty tight. Now I could put a lot more force on that, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drop the bike down onto the ground. I'll then get the camera back in position and I'll try it again. I just feel a lot better about putting weight downwards on the bike when it's not resting on the stand. So right now I'm just going to lower this down so it's just resting on the ground. Oh, that is actually as low as this is going to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift that up and put a block of wood under the rear. So I'm just going to put the weight on that. There we go. So that was literally just very lightly on there. Now I'm going to have another go at getting this bolt loose. The bike is now on the ground, so I'm just going to see if I can get this nut loosened. So first of all, I'll just try turning it using that ratchet. But I think that is too firm. Oh, there we go. That's going. So you can't quite see it, but this is the 17mm side. I'm just removing the nylock nut. I think now that that's moving, I can actually put the other handle on the other side. So that is now coming off quite easily. So that was just really tight. So yeah, I would definitely suggest loosening this off when the bike is on the side stand before you put it on the stand, because you don't want to pull the bike off just undoing this nut. That was the sound of many washers. So again, if you're going to do this outdoors, make sure you don't do it on gravel. So luckily I can see exactly where they landed. So I'm just going to grab those. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to use a drift. I'm just going to knock the bolt out from inside here. That's coming out very easily. What I'm just conscious of is that even though the back wheel is supported, I just want to make sure that the front of the bike doesn't drop away too much when this comes out. So just very lightly, and I can just feel that coming. And that's out, I think. Not out all the way. It's very nearly all the way out. That's just caught on the edge of the shock. I'm just going to turn that out. So we have it. So that is the bolt out. There is no washer on this side. The only washer is on the far side. So filming under here is somewhat more tricky. I think the thing to remember is that the bolt you're removing is actually this one. It's this inner one. Hopefully you can just about see that on the video. Let me turn the camera a little bit. So the bolt you need to be removing is actually this one. So this is on the bones. So if you're actually doing any suspension lowering, then that's the piece that you replace. But I'm actually going for this inner bolt in here, which is the one that's on the shock. Now the shock isn't attached at the top anymore, so I'm hoping that this should come out. Now because of where it is, this is going to need spanners rather than a ratchet. So on the left side of the bike, that's going to be a 17mm. I think that will, the ring spanner, no, the ring spanner won't fit. So for this, I think it's this is where having a second person might be helpful. But I'll see if I can do it on my own, because I'm sure some of you will be doing this on your own. Okay, that's not so bad. There we go. You probably can't see it, I'm actually lying on the ground beside the bike just to get this bolt out. Almost there. There we go. I appreciate the chain is probably right in the middle of that shot, but that's as low as I can get my camera. There we go. Aha. So, looking at this, I do actually need to remove the bones, because otherwise, actually, I can't get this bolt out. So, I think that's the same size. So, I shall have a go at that one. Again, this is where I think a second person would help. But I think if you can get the bike upright and hold it in, then you can do it on your own. There we go. Let's see whether I can do them up again on my own. So I can now feel that that is coming away, like that. There we go. There was no washer on the far side of that, just in case you're wondering. So that's now loose. So the last thing is just to pull this bolt out. And there we have it. Just going to pull the rear shock and through that hole. And there we go. So there you go. Hopefully you can see these two shocks side by side now. So as you can see, there does look like to be quite a significant difference in build quality. I was just going to give it an approximate measure, and it looks like that's about 420 millimeters. Now, that's not particularly scientific, so what I am just going to try and do is see if I can just line the ends up and just drop that through the end, just to see, put that bit of packing material in between. So I'm just going to put that on the top of there and drop that through so that the ends are pretty much exactly lined up. And actually then when I look through, you can't quite see it, but when I look down through the end of here, there is actually a bolt in the end of the Nitron shock. See if I can just remove that. There we go. So what I have here is actually that does look like it does line up pretty much perfectly. Yep, so the two shocks are exactly the same length. If I had to say to the absolute millimeter, that if anything, the stock shock is very, very slightly longer. Let's see if I can get a better thing to go down through the hole. There we go. So that is very much like that. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, hopefully you can. That's basically a bolt down through each end. Both seem to be middle to middle. So yeah, I think that's good enough that they are the same. I'm now going to do the thing that I know everybody loves. I'm going to weigh them. If you're one of those people who hates seeing things being weighed, then look away now, and you can pick up with a video later on. So first up, I'm going to weigh the stock shock. I've put that bit of packing material on just so there's something to stop it from rolling off while it's on there, but I've zeroed it with that on so we can see. So the stock shock, as it comes from Honda, is just over 3.5 kilos. So 3,528 grams is where the number settled. Okay. I shall now weigh the new Nitron shock. Now this is a lot bigger, so I'm kind of guessing it might be heavier, but then it's other materials, so maybe not. 3530 is the number we're looking for. 3515, so pretty much identical weight. So you're not adding any extra weight by having this much bigger unit. I mean, I don't know if you can see them. Tilt that up a bit. You see those side by side, that physically the Nitron shock is actually a lot bigger, but weight-wise it is marginally lighter, but not anything you'd notice, especially that low down on the bike. Okay, that's it. So now I'm going to put this back on, so I'll take the camera back to the bike. So what you may have noticed that when I took the old shock out, it was a little bit tight to actually fit it past the rest of the suspension assembly. So to give me a bit more space, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to take this rear guard off. There's just two screws in here and it comes away, and then I'll see if I can just put it in from the top. That whole thing just lifts out. There we go. So hopefully that will give me a bit more room, a bit more space to work, especially to get these in. So it won't fit down through that gap, but what this has let me see is that actually I do need to push it up from underneath, and if you can, not sure if you can quite see on the camera there, but I think it's actually the other end of the suspension linkage that's stopping me. So I might just see if I can take that out instead. So one thing I'm going to try and do is I'm just going to lift the bike up a little bit, see if there is enough swing to let me get that shock in. Bear in mind the swing arm is loose at the moment, so as I'm lifting the bike, it is falling away. Just keeping an eye on how tight the chain gets. No, I'm going to have to take out the big bolt. So what I'm going to have to do in order to get it in is actually to remove that rear bone altogether. So it's basically to undo the two bolts that were in here. So in hindsight, I probably could have left that one on. In fact, I might even put this one back through now. What I will do before I put it back together again is I'm just going to grease this up because there really doesn't seem to be enough grease on these when they're assembled. Greasing that all over, giving it a good coating. What I'm not going to do is actually tighten this up yet. I'm going to put it back on the bike, do the nut up, but I'll actually tighten everything up when I'm doing it, and I'll do it just all at once and torque everything up to the right values. So now I'm just going to try and take out the next one up, which is that one. Okay, so this one does have a washer on the far end of the bolt. It's taken off. Now to also unhook the rear brake, because that's on there. It's a lot more fiddly than I'd hoped, but hey, I'm just going to take that hook out for the rear brake, and then that bolt just about comes through that hole. There we go. Okay, so now that that's all off, that should give me enough space. Again, looking at how that bolt's come out, there's almost no grease on it, so I'll grease that up before it goes back in. So I'm just going to pass the shock up from underneath. I think the only thing that I'm aware of is that there's this fitting where I suppose if there is a remote preload adjuster, that would go. So it's whether I put that on the facing forwards or facing back. I am going to go for facing forwards, but we will see whether that was the right or the wrong decision as time goes on. So now that will pass up underneath there. I know you probably can't see it from that camera angle. That does slot in perfectly at the top there. What I might do, just to hold that in place, is to put this bolt back in. Actually, before I do that, there's a few things I need to do. Get my sequencing right. So before I put this in, I'm going to grease up the top suspension bolt, just so that when that goes back in, that's got lots of grease on it. Put that to one side. I'm also going to grease up this one, which is the one that's for the front end of the bone. Again, same reason. I think I'm going to push the shock in, and then I'm going to push put the bones back up underneath, and that way I know the shock's not going to drop out on the floor while I'm trying to get it set up. Right, there we go. That should do for that one. So here we go. So hopefully you can see that that's the fitting where the preload adjuster would go. I'm going to put that in pointing forwards. I don't know if that's right or wrong, because currently there isn't a preload adjuster for it, but nevertheless, it's got to go in one way or the other. So I'll put it in that way to begin with. There we go. So I can get that in. So what I might do actually is just put the top bolt in through the hole, and it's hanging. There we go. And then while I'm on this side, also put the bone back in. Get that lined up. There we go. So that's that all the way in. Now for the shock itself, it did come with a new bolt, so I'm not going to reuse the one I took out. So this is the bolt that came with the shock, so I'm going to use the one that Nitron have provided. Again, grease that up all the way around. I want to make sure that this is as free moving as it needs to be. What I might need to do, just adjust the height of the bike. Actually, that's pretty... Oh, now I remember why you don't do that one up, because you can't get the bolt in the hole. So I shall take that back out again. There we go. I shall push that through. There we go. And we'll go around on the other side and assemble the rest of it. So the bolt that Nitron has provided it's a 17mm on both sides. So luckily I've already got all my 17mm stuff out. So this is a nylock nut, and it's just at the end of it, so I'm sure there is a official torque setting, which I will check. But I think that is pretty tight, and it is into the nylock. It's into the nylon at the end of the nut, so I think we're good. Now that's in. So in hindsight, you don't need to remove the guard that was in here. All you need to do is remove this front one, which does mean taking the spring off the brake. I'll now put that back. There we go. We'll pop the lock nut on the far side of that. This is one where it's useful to get underneath the bike to do it up. So while I'm under here, and I'll show you this once everything's done and dusted, is that it looks surprisingly easy to get to the damper adjustment at the bottom of the new shock. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to torque these bolts up as required. Just remember to tighten that one up. That was the one that I'd left loose from before. The torque settings for these are 44 Newton meters for the lower shock bolt and the two bones bolts, and then the upper shock bolt is 54 Newton meters. Set my torque wrench up for 44. So again, just get underneath the bike to do this. So this one here is going to be done up to 44. Get my 17mm on the back. So where it can be useful to have an extra pair of hands, but there we go. That's 44 for that one. There we go, 44 Newton meters there as well. The very last thing I'm going to do on this side before I put the top bolt in, I'm just going to put the spring back on the brake pedal. If you remember, I had to take that off in order to get to the bone bolt. There we go. Not something you want to forget if you've taken it off. So before I finish on this side, I'm actually just going to put this the mudguard back on. I took it out thinking maybe I could get the shock out that way, but in hindsight it could have stayed on, and it's just that top bone bolt that needs to come free. So the last thing I need to do is just to put this nut back on here and torque that up. So this is going to be to 54 Newton meters. So this one is actually done up tighter than the other. So I think for this one is one where having an extra pair of hands might help. But what I'm going to try and do is first of all push this washer over the end of the bolt. You can maybe just about see. Okay, that's gone on okay. So far so good. And now see if I can put the nut on the end of there and just do that up without pushing the bolt out on the other side. Okay, that's gone in. So yeah, you can definitely do this on your own. Come around onto the other side, just hold that where it is and just do that up with a spinner. So all I need to do now is torque this up to 54 Newton meters. So I think that's pretty much there actually. Now what I might do is just see if I can get some, I'll switch these around and see if I can just get a bit more leverage from this side to push down. So I think that is pretty much tight. I haven't actually got the torque wrench to click just yet. So I'll give it one more go. That'll do. So there we go. That is all in. Very last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the battery connection back on. There we go. I managed to do it without losing the nut at the back. So that's it. That's my video on how to fit a Nitron R1 rear shock to a Honda CRF300 Rally. Be Be the same process for fitting it to a CRF300L, except for the bodywork removal, which will be different. So just in summary, it's just the 2 bolts that are holding the existing shock in place that you need to remove. And in order to get to the bottom bolt, and also to be able to take the shock out and put the new one in, it's the forward bolt only on the suspension bones that you need to remove. So that's the most forward one. If you just take that one out, that will give you access to the lower shock bolt, and also to be able to pull the old shock out and put your new one in. So this I've done with a Nitron. I know there's several others available. If you see my suspension special, I go through what some of them are that are currently available. I'm sure more will come in the future. So the one last thing that I would normally do is I would put the bike back on the ground. I would sit on it, I would bounce on it, I would get a feel for how long the side stand is. Now, because there's quite a lot of work that goes into putting the bodywork back on, and I have a few things to do on the bike before then, I'm going to do that in a separate video which will appear in the community section on the YouTube channel. I hope this video has been interesting and useful. If it has, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.